my name is Alexandra Kelleher, and I'm super excited to be here with you today at the NCEA 2021. I'm going to be presenting about a project called the Classrooms Around the World project. I'm hoping as a teacher it can be something for fellow teachers to bring straight into the classroom, but with the flexibility to be able to adapt to younger students, older students, or however much time you have in your classrooms. A little bit about me: I have my master's in education and my BA in global studies. I work at Notre Dame School in Santa Barbara, California, where I'm the academic coordinator and the 3rd through 6th grade humanities teacher. So a lot going on, but it's been a great year. I've had the ability to teach in a few different countries, which has been amazing, and I work now mostly in the private education sector. I am a product of Catholic schools, and so I find it really important. Although I've worked at Montessori's, I kind of found my way back home to the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. Now, before we get started today, I want you to pause this video and go grab a journal and a pencil, not only to take notes, but I'm going to have a few options and places for you to do a little bit of reflection on how you can best use this in your classroom. So go ahead and pause and go get whatever you need. All right, so we're back, and at the risk of losing you, I really wanted to read directly from the screen because this Catholic School Standard 7.3 was such a laser focus point for me when creating this project. So Catholic School Standard 7.3 is that curriculum and instruction for 21st century learning should provide students with the knowledge, understanding, and skills to become creative, reflective, literate, critical and moral evaluators, problem solvers, decision makers, and socially responsible global citizens. And Pope Francis has been such a guiding light in our church, making sure that global citizenship is really at the forefront. And he is steering our generation to make sure that we don't think of neighbors as just the people near us, but as everyone around the world. All right, so when creating this project, I used the hourglass framework, starting with a big wide lens, bringing it all the way down and looking at a few countries and ourselves, and then bringing it back out to how are we going to walk through the world differently after this project. So to kind of go through each step, big picture is where we ask those big questions. What is education? What does it mean? How does it look in different areas? Step 2 is explore. This is the chance for students to kind of look at the whole world and decide what areas do they want to focus on a little bit more. And then step 3 is where they bring that focus in. So they're going to choose 3 countries as well as look at their own, which brings us to step 4, where we can compare and contrast the education system that they know really well compared to the 3 that they've done a little bit of research on and seen. Step 5 is where we actually bring it back out again, away from our classroom, and we connect either with someone in our community or someone in the larger global village to really see like how the research connects with the actual people who are living these lives in different areas. And then finally, 6, reflect. I have it as bringing it really big again because this is a place where you can advocate for students to reflect on how they're going to change their behavior, or how they're going to look at meeting new people, or even some sort of service project, which I'll talk more about. All right, so big picture. This is where we start with those big questions, and it feels big because it is a big question. One way I really like to do this is through a concept attainment. So this is a concept attainment example from my class a couple weeks ago. You can see we're in person and outside, so we're really lucky in that respect. But we were studying Mali architecture in looking at like the Western African like specifically Mali, like how are they building their buildings? And so that is a concept that was pretty foreign to my students. And so we kind of opened it up, and I really accepted every answer that students were coming up with. So I just put the words in the middle. For this example, you would do education in the middle, and then just solicit from the crowd, like, what is education? How do we know it's education? How do we know something isn't education? And we're just getting ideas up on the board. There's no wrong answers, even if you're thinking like, I don't know if that's exactly it. We keep it on the board, and then students are going to be able to look a little bit later and in the project and see, do we still agree with all of our ideas at the beginning? So there's some really good buy-in and learning there. If the concept attainment is kind of going in all sorts of directions or it's feeling a little bit too big, you can also, start that way and then bring in some resources. So some resources that I like to bring in is really just Googling things like 10 classrooms around the world or scenes from school. I found some really great ones there for like 3rd through 6th grade, but you can definitely find more picture-based ones or like lower reading level, or there's some really great deep dive resources for students if you are in a higher grade. The reason we're kind of doing this concept attainment and looking at resources is because we want to decide on a class definition for education. And instead of just looking for a simple sentence, I want you to come up with 3 anchor words that can be the lens that students look through when they're doing the rest of their research for this project. So, there are some big lofty ones like learning and things like that. But if you see something that students are saying like education has to have a whiteboard, can you tease out a little bit more? Like, okay, a whiteboard maybe means that there's always a teacher who is explaining information using images or words. So it could be more like display. So whatever is working best for your class is great, but I want to make sure that it's not too specific and it is more of like a lens that they can look through other different styles of education in different parts of the world and it still can apply. So as a teacher, you might just have to guide the students a little bit on their words. But I also recommend taking a picture of your concept attainment so that you can reflect back and you have those words ready for the end of the project. All right, number 2 is explore. So this is where students take those 3 anchor words and they're going to figure out what countries they're going to apply them to. And any countries will do, but sometimes looking at the almost 200 countries in the world can be really overwhelming for students. So these are 3 points where kind of filters that teachers can use to hone in and have students choose a little bit more of specific areas. So the first is community connection. And our community is lucky enough to have people from all over the world. We have a lot of both students and staff who are from Mexico and have been to school systems in Mexico. And so it would be really great to connect with our community members there. If they want to share, it's worth checking in. We also have a staff member from Syria, and so she has a really different experience, but we've also found that there's a lot of similarities. So pulling on those community connections, especially if you kind of want to highlight the diversity that your community has, can be a really great way to choose the 3 countries that you're going to be studying throughout this unit. Another one is curriculum. So curriculum for me can kind of steer either way. For example, as I showed you in the first section, that we were studying West African architecture, we had also recently studied ancient China. Now, as the teacher that I am, I'm actually going to steer my students away from those areas because they're pretty familiar with them, and I don't want them choosing something that just because they kind of already know a little bit about it. I want them to challenge themselves, and we can dive deeper on those areas if they would like. So I would choose to steer away from that curriculum, but if you have some units coming up that it would be a perfect kind of tie-in and alignment with your curriculum, then that could be a really strong way to bring this project into the classroom. And then finally is classroom curiosities. So I have a bunch of students who are very into soccer, and there are some amazing players coming from Brazil and Argentina that they just love. And so they kind of ask about those. And so I was thinking, hey, we could use those countries, Brazil and Argentina, to kind of show what it was like and what education was like for these players that you are so into. And then there's immediately some excitement around those ideas. And so there's a lot of student buy-in as well. So once you have those filters in place to kind of guide student interest, there are a couple ways that you can show the class all the student thinking. So if you are in person, Post-its are an awesome way on a big map to just like for students to really quickly see the patterns that are developing in their interests. And there's also enough room for students to write the reason why they're interested. And that's great for peers to be able to look and see, oh, I agree with that, or I'm not so sure. But it's also really great for teachers to kind of look in and see, oh, this is why they're thinking this way, and you can kind of guide them to other countries that might be a great way to study. And mind maps is another great way, also for in-person, but definitely for virtual and hybrid, for students to kind of real-time all be on the same map and be pinning areas that they're super interested in learning about. Another great feature is that you can not only add words, but you can add a picture. And so it can kind of turn into students trying to like explain why they want this, because ultimately you're going to have to vote and just study 3 countries, which can feel like hard to choose when there are so many great areas to study and student excitement about lots of areas. So students can kind of explain why they want to choose that and try to persuade other students. So right now what I would love you to do is pause this video and explain how not only you would, go back here, how you might filter your students through one of these or any of these different ways if you're looking for community connection, curriculum, or class curiosities, or a mixture of all 3. So how that would look in your classroom, and then also how you think you might be able to show student learning. So pause, give yourself maybe 3 or 4 minutes to just explore how step 1 and 2 could kind of be used in your classroom. All right, so step 3 is dive deeper. So we have the 3 countries that we are going to study, as well as the 1 country that we are in right now. And now that it's all been decided, it is time to research. So this is a really great time to bring in those informational text reading standards. And it also is a chance to kind of like bolster students' note-taking. So being able to read and then synthesize the information in a clear and concise way. So I have made worksheets, which I will link or give you the link to at the end of this presentation. But essentially it looks like this on one side, and on the other side is countries 3 and 4, 4 being the country that we are living in now, wherever you may be. I think likely most of us are in the US. But so for each country, you're starting with the country name, 3 things that you notice about the school in the country, and then what can we infer is important about education to this country. So for 3rd through 6th grade, what I did is I created what's called a playlist. So I kind of did some back channeling, did a little bit of research about the 3 countries that they were doing to make sure that it wasn't just Google randomly giving them a lot of information to sift through. So I created a playlist of about 10 different resources that had just like YouTube videos or some interesting articles about learning in the countries where they chose. So to kind of narrow it down, it can be really helpful to give a playlist. If you're in the younger grades, that could even look like reading a book from that country or a couple books, so you can compare and contrast. But really, we just want people, the students, to be observing and noticing, and then looking at that observation and seeing what can we learn. You'll notice at the very bottom, I have the 3 anchor words, so always looking through that lens, just remembering, reminding students to really come back to those anchor words. And then once you have completed that, we are moving on to step 4. So comparing and contrasting. We have notes for the 3 countries, and we're even going to do our own country, the observations and what we find important. And then we move on to this 3rd page in the worksheet, if your students are able and it fits with like kind of the academic standards that you're aiming for. Again, those 3 anchor words that we're coming back to, and then we're looking for examples of those in our research. So say learning was one of the words. And so maybe an example of that was in a video that you a video that you watched about schools in England. You saw that the students were raising their hands a ton. And so students can say an example was they saw students raising their hands. So really just kind of like looking through the resources, and as a teacher, kind of guiding those resources to make sure that you can answer these questions. Once you've kind of found examples of the 3 anchor words in all of the different countries, you're going to move on to that actual comparing and contrasting. So the box on the left is examples of educational characteristics that we found in every culture. So we're looking for through lines, something that we found the same in every single one. May need to be a little bit of guiding, but likely in different classrooms around the world, although there's lots of differences, you will be able to find some similarities. And the students will always find those, which has been great in my experience. And then there's always going to be examples of differences, of course, and this is a cool time to touch on, are there differences in our own city classrooms or our own school classrooms. So highlighting that differences is totally fine, but that we can always find similarities as well. All right, so number 5 is my favorite step. It is so exciting, and there are so many ways to really take it to the next level in your class, and it is connect. So there are a couple of different ways to connect, but ultimately the goal is for you to connect with some sort of primary source that can explain what life is like in a classroom in a different country. We're really just like bolstering that idea of global citizenship, and especially with this 21st century technology, our neighbors, even if they're far away, can feel really close. So some opportunities for asynchronous connection is a pen pal letter. When I worked at a school, we became pen pals with a school in Ghana. It was amazing, and it was so cool to have the actual handwritten letters that we sent off and that we received. The one drawback is it just takes a really long time, so it is a little hard if we're getting closer to the end of the year. It might not be able to do the one-to-one back and forth. A really way to kind of solve that problem and make it a lot quicker is sending a video recording. So either each student sends a video recording, or the whole class kind of sends a message and just some sort of little greeting to another school, and another school is able to send you one back. That can be a lot quicker than the physical pen pal letters. And I'll explain a little bit more now about how you can get in connection with the school. So with our synchronous resources, I do want you to just reflect back in. If you are doing a community, kind of like highlighting your community's diversity, checking in with the people who are right there on your campus and could help out and give some insight into what school is like in another country would be amazing. And it's really great because the students already have a connection with that person, and so it feels really close to their hearts. Now, if that is not an option or not something that can work for your school, things like a Zoom call with a class can be really, really impactful. The pen pals that we had in Ghana, after we exchanged the letters, we realized this is a little too slow. We want to connect even more. And so what we did was we set up a Zoom call. And it meant that our students came to school early. Their students stayed a little bit late to equate for the time zone differences, but it was really, really special. And that is something that the kids will never forget on either side of the world. And I wanted to highlight impactico.org because they are focused on connecting classrooms that are interested in doing this sort of exchange. They are focused more on upper elementary to junior high. So if you are outside of that range, it's still worth checking out because they have amazing ideas. Because it can be a little tricky getting kids together on a Zoom call. So what they do is they check your technology for you before, and they check their technology to make sure that everything's compatible. And then another thing that they do is give you some activities, whether it is an art project that the kids can be doing and then show each other, or they have questions, or if you're in person, you can give a little school tour. So even if you are not in kind of the age range for Impactico to serve you, you can get a lot of great ideas. But I really want to highlight that this step feels really big, but it is really important because it kind of takes it from like the lofty research side, and it brings it straight into the classroom with real meaningful connection. So I'm actually going to have you pause right now and just brainstorm. What do you feel comfortable with? Who would you have to ask questions to if you were going to do something like a Zoom call? What would maybe work best for your school? So take a few minutes and take a couple notes on what you think might work best. All right, so hopefully you came up with some great kind of groundwork plans to be able to connect with some students around the world. And then at the end of this project, it's really important to kind of just debrief and reflect a little bit because there's a lot of learning that's been happening and a lot of connection. And so in order to kind of make sure we take all the skills that were learned and make them applicable global citizenship tools, we really do have to do that reflection. And so here's kind of like our roadmap for debriefing. The top two are a little bit more academic. So if you want to make sure that you're getting those academic points driven home, something like an assessment prompt can be really effective because you can see student thinking, but there's also a chance to get like ELA standards met. or something like more of a persuasive essay. So not just a simple reflection, but taking what the students have learned and then seeing how they would want to persuade someone to think maybe the way that they've learned. So that can be really, really helpful. A question like, what do you like about our education system, can get their brains thinking, and then having them try to persuade somebody that it should change in some way, or maybe not. And then these bottom two are a little bit more project-based, something like a service project, sort of project aligned, but I had a class that after this project, they actually wanted to write gratitude letters to the current principal that we had because they were just so moved by seeing the education system in all different places, and they were feeling really grateful for what they were experiencing, which was amazing to see. And so we kind of followed the student on that. And then other service projects, you can have students brainstorm about ways that you can support students around the world, especially if the classroom that you connected with has any sort of needs. You know, there's already an immediate desire to help people that we feel more connected with. So something like a book drive, a school supply roundup is great, especially kind of veering away from just financial fundraisers, but to more like supply driven is always really powerful. And then student-led options, just following the students. Sometimes these projects or this unit in general can be like, whoa, that was a lot. Now we're ready to move on. And sometimes it can really bring this line of inquiry from students that you want to follow. So if they're having a lot more questions, if they're wanting to do even more research, you know, following that can be really great, especially if you have time. Maybe it can even be something that you come back to at the end of the year when we have those kind of end of May, early June days. It can be like a revisit. And just if you want to tie it all into a project-based learning, there are absolutely opportunities to bring in math and science components to this project for sure. So just a quick rundown. I've kind of said a lot to you today, but remember at the very beginning, starting really big picture, having students just think, what is education in general? Then allowing them to explore the world and really kind of think about places that they're more interested in learning more about. Then that dive deeper with just those 3 countries that you want your students or that they come up with, that they research a lot and deeply. Turning that around and looking at ourselves as well so we can compare and contrast not only those countries to ourselves, but those all 4 of them, you know, seeing those through lines of similarities, but also the differences. Step 5, that actual real human connection, whether it be from your community or it comes from across the world. It can be so impactful, and I'm excited for you guys to do that. And then finally, reflecting. So reflecting on everything they've learned and how they can apply that as a global citizen in the world. And I really like this quote by Frank Sinatra, kind of an unlikely source, but it kind of brought this whole idea into a little bit of a lighter, on the lighter side. So if you don't know the guy on the other side of the world, love him anyways, because he's just like you. He has the same dreams, the same hopes and fears. It's all one world, pal. We're all neighbors. So of course, you know, just understanding that anyone around the world is also someone that we as Catholics really want to treat as our neighbor. And hopefully by bringing, you know, deeper research into the classroom about other places, students feel more connected even if the distance hasn't changed. So I wanted to end with just a couple resources. If you go to tinyurl.com/classrooms around the world, that is my Google Slides where you can use the worksheet, the 3-page worksheet that I've created. Use it, change it however you want. You just make a copy for yourself. And then a reminder that empatico.org is the place where they bring together classrooms from around the world who are wanting to do kind of a virtual pen pal idea. And then I also just wanted to highlight Global Oneness Project. They are really great because they have resources for everything from pictures for the youngers to kind of more of a complex look at big issues around the world for the older students, but they are, it's just made for teachers to be able to bring global citizenship into the classroom. But overall, thank you guys so much. And if you have any questions, I will make sure that my email is linked here as well. But thank you so much.